Welcome to the Clinical File. I'm John Cordray, and I'm a licensed professional counselor. And this is my mental health analysis of the Luigi Mangione case. I will be focusing on the main mental health and psychological indicators while providing the backstory. I don't just talk about the crimes, I talk about the psychology behind the crimes and the mysteries that captivate us. I look beyond the facts of the case to understand the why of the crime. My analysis is based on my speculations. It's not a diagnosis of anyone involved in this case. Is it possible for a mind to be so highly calibrated for logic and math that it eventually calculates the human life as nothing more than a variable to be removed? What happens when the pressure of being a lifelong valedictorian meets a physical pain so deep it shatters the very identity of the person suffering? Can a person remain sane in their own eyes while meticulously planning a cold-blooded execution for what they believe is for the greater good? In this analysis, we're going to explore how a young man from a background of extreme wealth and academic prestige allegedly became a federal murder suspect. We'll look at the evidence not just from the street in the front of the Hilton, but from the digital footprints and the handwritten pages found in the backpack in Pennsylvania. On the morning of December 4, 2024, at approximately 6:45 a.m., the CEO of United Healthcare, Brian Thompson, was walking toward the New York Hilton Midtown. He was in town for an annual investor conference, a routine event for high-level executive. But waiting for him was a hooded figure who did not hesitate. The suspect allegedly used a 9mm firearm with a 3D printed suppressor, firing multiple rounds with a precision that suggests intense mental and physical rehearsal. This level of planning is our first psychological indicator, the transition from internal ideation to predatory execution. Luigi, who was only 26 at the time of the shooting, was not a typical suspect. He was the valedictorian of his 2016 class at the prestigious Gilman School in Baltimore. He was a math whiz, a wrestler, and a graduate of the University of Pennsylvania with both a bachelor's and master's in computer science. When we see a perfect record like this, we have to look at the high achiever's shadow. High achievers often tie their entire self-worth to the performance and their ability to control their environment. If that control is stripped away, specifically by a physical betrayal like chronic injury, the psychological reaction can be a total rejection of the system that failed to fix them. Luigi's family was one of the most prominent in Maryland, known for real estate development and philanthropy. His grandfather, Nick, built an empire that included country clubs and hotels. Luigi grew up in an environment where excellence wasn't just encouraged, it was a baseline expectation. Psychologically, this creates an enormous burden to maintain a false self of perfection. When the true self is in pain or struggling, the individual may feel they have no safe place to express vulnerability without failing the family legacy. This leads to isolation even when surrounded by a supportive family. In 2022, while living in a co-living space in Hawaii called Surf Break, Luigi's life began to revolve around a medical condition of chronic pain. This is a condition where the vertebrae slips out of place, often causing debilitating nerve pain. For an athlete and a young man in his mid-20s, this was a catastrophic blow to his identity. He reportedly told roommates that his back pain made dating and physical intimacy impossible. Chronic pain is a potent psychological disruptor that can lead to cognitive narrowing. The world becomes very small, and the focus shifts entirely to the source of the pain and the desire for relief, or in this case, revenge. Is chronic pain simply a physical sensation, or can it become a lens through which an entire society is viewed as a source of torture? In July 2023, Luigi underwent spinal fusion surgery. On social media, he initially praised the surgery, posting an x-ray of the metal rods and the screws in the spine. He claimed to be shocked by how quickly he was off his pain meds. However, something changed in the months that followed. Despite the successful surgery on paper, Luigi's mental state seemed to shift toward radicalization. He moved to San Francisco and began to go radio silent with his old friends. This is a classic psychological red flag, social withdrawal, and ideological cocooning. When a person cuts off their healthy support networks, they often replace them with digital echo chambers that reinforce their grievances. He began reading the works of Ted Kaczynski, the Unabomber, and even posted reviews on Goodreads that seemed to sympathize with the anti-technology and anti-system philosophy. He wasn't just a man with a bad back anymore. He was becoming an ideologue. By late 2024, Luigi had reportedly left his job as a data engineer and began traveling under false identities. He used the name Mark Rosario to check into a hotel in New York City. The use of an alias is a clinical sign of identity fragmentation. He was no longer Luigi, the valedictorian. He was a soldier on a mission. This allowed him to distance himself from the moral consequences of his alleged actions. The logistics were staggering. He reportedly practiced with a 3D printed gun and researched the CEO's schedule. This isn't the behavior of someone who just snapped. This is a targeted violence where the perpetrator spends months or years in the pathway to violence, moving from grievance to ideation to research and finally to the breach. How does a person reconcile a life of philanthropy and academic brilliance with the cold mechanical act of stalking a human being? The manifesto found in his backpack at the time of his arrest is a critical piece of the psychological puzzle. It contained the phrase, "These parasites simply had it coming." The word parasite is a key indicator of dehumanization. In order to commit the crime like this, the perpetrator must first strip the victim of their humanity. By labeling an executive as a parasite, the act of murder becomes, in the perpetrator's mind, an act of cleansing or justice. He even wrote, "I do apologize for any strife or traumas, but it had to be done." This shows a mission-oriented mindset where the individual believes their subjective truth outweighs the laws of society. On December 9, 2024, 5 days after the shooting, a customer at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania noticed a man who looked like the suspect. He was working on a laptop. When police approached him, they found a backpack containing a 3D printed gun, a silencer, fake IDs, and $2,000 in cash. Interestingly, Luigi didn't dispose of the evidence. In mission-based crimes, the perpetrator often keeps the tools and the message because they want to be identified with the act eventually. The evidence is their legacy. Psychologically, this is a form of grandiosity. He didn't just want the CEO gone. He wanted the world to know why he did it. The legal proceedings throughout 2025 have been a battle of technicalities and mental health narratives. In September 2025, a New York judge dismissed the terrorism enhancement of the murder charge, ruling that the legal definition of terrorism didn't quite fit the state's narrow criteria. However, the second-degree murder charge remains, carrying a potential sentence of 25 years to life. Meanwhile, federal prosecutors are pursuing a case that includes stalking and the use of a firearm in a crime of violence, for which they are seeking the death penalty. Luigi has appeared in court with what some describe as a calm and defiant demeanor. He has even shouted at reporters, accusing them of being out of touch. This lack of remorse is a clinical indicator of overvalued ideation. His belief system is so rigid and so central to his identity that he cannot feel guilt for what he views as a righteous act. Does the absence of regret in a perpetrator signal a complete detachment from reality or a total commitment to a new, darker one? One of the most jarring updates came during the suppression hearings in December 2025. The defense tried to throw out the evidence found in the backpack, arguing the search was illegal. During these hearings, witnesses described Luigi as animated and expressive. This is a fascinating contrast to the flat affect usually seen in such cases. It suggests he is still very much engaged in the intellectual side of his defense. He is treating the trial like another system to be hacked or navigated. As of early January 2026, the court is preparing for the next phases of both the state and federal trials. The defense is expected to lean heavily into his history of chronic pain and diminished capacity. From a psychological standpoint, we have to ask, was his pain the cause of the crime, or was it the permission he gave himself to act in a deeper, more pre-existing resentments? Many people suffer from chronic pain without becoming violent. The difference in Luigi's case may be the intersection of his high intelligence and his sense of exceptionalism. If you have always been the smartest person in the room and the system fails to fix your pain, you might conclude that the system is just not broken, but evil. And if you're exceptional, you might believe you are the only one qualified to take it down. Is the hero narrative a way for the mind to hide the fact that it was simply given up on being human? The victim, Brian Thompson, left behind a wife and 2 sons. The clinical file in this case isn't just about a man who pulled the trigger. It's about the victimology, how a man became a symbol for a stranger's rage. Thompson was targeted because of his role, not his character. In Luigi's mind, Brian Thompson wasn't a father or a husband. He was a proxy for every insurance denial ever written. This is the ultimate tragedy of the ideological mind. It kills symbols, but it leaves real blood on the ground. As we move toward the trial dates in May 2026, the focus will remain on Luigi's mental state and the time of the shooting. The federal death penalty charges add a layer of gravity to the charges that changes the entire psychological landscape of the case. Will he maintain his revolutionary persona, or will the weight of the potential death sentence cause the false self to finally crumble? This case remains one of the most significant psychological studies of our time. It forces us to look at the dark side and hidden cost of chronic physical and mental suffering. The clues were there: the isolation, the fixation on pain, the shift in reading habits, and the meticulous planning. When we piece them together, we see a portrait of a man who decided that his own internal logic was more important than the lives of others. It's a chilling reminder that the most dangerous minds can be the ones that have been trained to be the most successful. This is a tragic story on so many different levels. Luigi had a very successful upbringing. His family was very successful. He was very intelligent. He was a valedictorian. He had a lot going for him, but he had chronic pain, and that chronic pain would not go away. And he felt like the source of the denials of insurance and the escalating rates of healthcare, he felt that his mission was to eliminate the source of that issue, and that was the CEO. And unfortunately, Brian Thompson was the victim and the target, and he left behind a family. So tragic. If you suffered any type of chronic pain, you could probably relate to how Luigi was feeling, and he just wanted relief, and he couldn't find it, and so he took it out on someone else. I'm not excusing Luigi's behavior at all. Chronic pain is serious, but it should never lead to violence. So what did you think about this case? Were there any elements that stood out to you? If you want more mental health analysis of true crime stories like this one, be sure to subscribe for more. And if you found this case compelling, be sure to watch this next story. It will make you more aware of your surroundings. Thank you for joining me today. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe.